We continue with the story of Brian Clough's legendary journey in football management. At the end of his tenure with Derby in 1973, his life was at a crossroads. Today, we will go back in time and tell you about Clough's remaining career. How he became the manager of Brighton before quickly moving on to the club he despised the most, Leeds United. A job that would only last for 44 days. How he was snubbed by the FA for the most coveted job at the time, the manager of England. And finally, his miracles with Nottingham Forest, a club he found at the bottom of the second division and took to European glory. We'll start right where we left off, his resignation from Derby in 1973. An important characteristic to know about Clough is his persistence to get better at his way of playing rather than to adjust his style to accommodate players. If you don't fit in his system, you're out. Simple as that. Clough was very different from the usual old school English managers of his time. He believed there was a better way to play football than forcing the issue and winning through sheer aggression.
Yeah, but there's no way you can win it better.
Why not?
No.
But that's the only hope I've got.
Which was one of the reasons why he despised Don Revie more than anyone in his profession. Revie was the Leeds manager for 13 years during the 60s and 70s. He built a huge dynasty with Leeds and made them into one of the best teams in the country. But his way of management and how he viewed the sport couldn't have been more different than Clough's. Don Revie represented the classic old school kind of English manager who had been at the helm for decades. Clough represented an unprecedented style of management with great ambitions and playing the right way. He never failed to acknowledge that Revie's achievements based on the results were very admirable and probably second to none at the time. But he also believed that football was about creativity and could be played beautifully, while Revie's Leeds represented the very opposite of that. As Clough would say, football is a subjective sport and I just like to play it in my way. He called Revie's side dirty old Leeds and published his views in a newspaper column. He mentioned how the club deserved to be thrown back to the second division for the way they played football.
If I said something about he plays in the Leeds style and people interpreted that as an insult, then that is their problem.
This wasn't just his view, it was common knowledge how Leeds would get results through brute force and harsh conduct on the pitch. Influencing the referees and injuring opponents was a common theme throughout their golden years. Clough and Revie would appear on a television interview together soon, which gave great insight into how fundamentally different they were from each other. After leaving Derby, the whole country knew about the hottest property in English football. The unemployed Clough and his assistant Taylor had a lot of different offers to choose from. They chose to go with Brighton in the third division of English football. Even by his standards, no one expected him to take that job. Brighton were nowhere near the club they are today. They had never seen the first division, and Clough's exploits with Derby made them go all in for him. Mike Bamber, who was the Brighton chairman at the time, had huge ambitions for the club. He wanted the duo of Clough and Taylor to do the same magic they had done at Derby and Hartlepool, and he was willing to match their player demands in the market. Clough was notorious for signing expensive players behind the board's back, so to find a chairman who didn't need to be deceived seemed like the perfect match. But Brighton was just a small stop on his way to bigger things. Clough managed just one win in his first 10 games in charge. This included an 8-2 thrashing by Bristol Rovers. The year 1973 ended with a lot of losses and danger of relegation into the 4th division. But the new year turned their fate around and soon they were safely out of the bottom spot. But Clough didn't hold back mid-season when he mentioned that they couldn't get promoted, even if Einstein was on their team. The form slumped again leading into the end of the campaign, and Brighton finished just 2 points clear of relegation. The 70s were rife with controversy regarding who the next England manager should be. It was Don Revie who was chosen to lead the national team in July 1974. This meant that the Leeds job was open now. Clough jumped ship right away when he got the offer, but Peter Taylor didn't follow him this time. Revie failed as the manager of England and made a strange decision to move to the United Arab Emirates. His career over there ended in controversies around financial misdealings. His legacy with Leeds was eventually tarnished because of this. When he left the role in 1977, the FA publicly mentioned that they were looking for a young candidate who could bring fresh ideas to the team. Clough was with Nottingham Forest at the time. If the country wholeheartedly agreed on one thing back then, it was that he was the best candidate to become the next manager. He ticked all the boxes, and there was no doubt that he could take them to the moon if he wanted. He really wanted the job as well. The fact that he would be filling in Revie's shoes probably motivated him even more. The media and the public had never shown such collective belief in a single person for the England job before Clough. What happened next will explain why the country has failed to win anything in over half a century now. The FA claimed they wanted young blood and fresh ideas, but it was run by old men with rigid attitudes. They could not have handled the brutal honesty and unfiltered nature of Brian Clough as the manager of England. They feared he would speak out against the establishment and create chaos.
They didn't want any trouble. They didn't want me. They thought that I was going to take over the FA, which I was going to.
Even if he believed he could have won big things for the country, they weren't willing to do it if they couldn't control him. The FA has always wanted a yes man who can do the routine job and stop there. Clough was on the opposite spectrum of that. While they did a pony show in 1977 about having an interview with him at their headquarters, it was suspected that West Ham manager Ron Greenwood had already been chosen to take over from Revie. To this day, not choosing Clough is considered to be the FA's biggest blunder. When Revie left Leeds and Clough came in to fill his big shoes, no one knew what to expect. He was given the reins over the best team in the country at the time, but the manager didn't just want to win, he wanted to win the right way. He had a very different approach to management, and on his first day at the club had an important message for the players. He told them to throw all of their medals into the bin because they didn't win any of them fairly. The players were already familiar with his past comments and open criticism for the club as well as Revie. They never warmed up to him. The first match was against Liverpool in the 1974 Charity Shield final. Clough was insistent with his players on playing fairly and not the usual ill-disciplined way. The club captain, Billy Bremer, got sent off for violent conduct, while winger Johnny Giles hit Kevin Keegan with a right hook in the middle of the match. He couldn't control a side that was so loyal to his predecessor, who stood against everything Clough believed in. It was a match made in hell from the very start, and after just one win in the opening 6 league games, Clough's journey ended. There are a lot of speculations about the plethora of reasons why he wasn't given considerable time to prove himself. The players had something similar to a no-confidence vote and approached the board for a change. Eventually, it didn't work out, and the very day he was sacked, he appeared on a television show alongside Don Revie. What followed was a candid conversation that revealed the massive difference in how both people viewed not just football, but life itself. The interview is still available to watch on YouTube. After a few months away from football, Clough went to Nottingham Forest in January 1975. The first year or so was spent building foundations by bringing the right kind of players and getting rid of unwanted ones. In July 1976, his old assistant joined him after leaving Brighton. Taylor's influence on Clough's achievements cannot be understated. He was the talent spotter and built the teams Clough managed. The duo went on to repeat what they had done at Derby, but this time even better. In 1976-77, Nottingham Forest was promoted to the First Division. The very next year, the newly promoted side won the First Division title. They won it in style as well, finishing 7 points clear of second place Liverpool, and went on to become one of the rare clubs to win the First Division title as a newly promoted side. They also lifted the 1978 League Cup against Liverpool in the final. The 1978-79 season saw an underdog European Cup run from the Forest side. They were poised to get eliminated at every step of the way, but ended up doing the unexpected. Clough and Nottingham Forest won their first ever European Cup. They defeated Malmo 1-0 in the final, a feat even Don Revie couldn't achieve with his Leeds side. The next year, they did it again, another European Cup title for a side that was in the second division just a few years ago. Their European journeys in both seasons were incredible campaigns to follow. These brilliant squads were then sold off in the market to capitalise on the inflated price of players. The rebuild that followed was simply not as good as the old guard. In 1982, Taylor admitted this was a mistake, and since he hadn't been doing justice to the club, he wished to take an early retirement. This would prove to be the end of the iconic duo. Clough continued at Forest and regularly competed at the top of the table. In 1992, the first ever televised Premier League game was between Nottingham Forest and Liverpool. Clough won the game, but that season would turn out to be his last. The slump in form and irredeemable results ended with Forest getting relegated and Clough's 18-year-long tenure at the club coming to an end. He published an autobiography in 1994 which explained how he viewed the past few decades of his life. He lived a large and unapologetic life and wouldn't have it any other way. Brian Clough was the greatest English manager that they never had. Do you think a personality like Clough or Mourinho's could stand today? Or has football gone too soft now? Let us know below.